I thought you said that would work. It worked in the movie. You mean the movie lied? I'm John Rankin with the Retro Review of The Return of the Living Dead from 1985, in celebration of the 4th of July, when the dead came back to life and devoured a bunch of goddamn idiots in Louisville, Kentucky. Yes, I know it's pronounced Louisville. Ha! So I decided to retro review this, and man, coming up on the 40-year anniversary of this movie coming out. And I will argue this is the only good return of film that has existed in the entire canon. Return of the Living Dead Part 2 had a couple decent moments, such as the throwing of the brains out of the back of the delivery truck. Return of the Living Dead Part 3 wasn't good, except for the incredibly hot lead, but yeah, then they were doing like Rave to the Grave and other stuff that Sci-Fi decided to replay for quite a while, and yeah, this is the only one that captured the spirit of silly comedy with good goopy body horror with a dose of 80s. Do a lot of coke and vote for Ronald Reagan. Do, 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 do. So this was written and directed by Dan O'Bannon, who has since passed away. Rest in peace, Dan O'Bannon. You did good. Because he didn't just do this film. He also wrote Alien. He wrote Dead and Buried. Kind of fitting that he would end up doing this. He also did Heavy Metal, that weird animated movie that many people consider a cult classic, and I don't know if I've ever actually seen in full. So I need to work on that at some point. He also did Invaders from Mars, the remake, not the original, because he wasn't that old. Life Force, as well as Total Recall and other projects. And the story was by 3 people, including the guy that played Johnny from Night of the Living Dead. They're coming to get you, Barbara. I don't think he actually talked like that, but nevertheless. So a couple other people, including one guy that wrote Night of the Living Dead, did the story. And the story is admittedly a little bit simple, but if you actually just peek beneath the surface, you will realize that the main theme of this film is the dead can feel. They can feel every bit of pain, they can feel the rot, and that's why they eat the brains. To just get a little bit of relief, because even after you die, the pain doesn't go away. You had Clu Gulager, who I always remember from that MST3K episode. Which one? I'm going to let you guys try to remember in the comments. He plays Burt. It's ironic that there is a friend of his named Ernie. That had to have been intentional. There is no way that it wasn't intentional. Ernie, by the way, Don Calfa, who plays a mortician. And you also have Frank, who is James Karen. Such a Karen in this. He was Mr. Teague and Poltergeist. You moved the cemetery, but you never moved the bodies. You only moved the headstones, didn't you? That guy that Craig T. Nelson was yelling at. Fun fact about Craig T. Nelson, he actually was able to help out on the Poltergeist set quite a bit because he was the acting coach. Okay, now that everybody has turned off this review because of that, I'm going to talk about Return of the Living Dead. Basically, the dead can't be killed if you stab them through the brain. They can be burned, and they can be destroyed like that, but then the problem becomes the ashes get up into the sky, and if it rains, it will end up reviving more dead. So really, it's a catch-22, and a catch-brain 22. You also had Tom Matthews, who played Freddy, who was a guy that would get acid thrown in his eyes and would have the weird, face hugger things on his eyes, and would go after Tina, played by Beverly Rudolph. I do have to say the young lady that played Trash, who basically looked like a more punk version of Cyndi Lauper, and really loved to get naked in this movie. The woman that played Trash, not Cyndi Lauper, that would have been weird. At least she looked good. And you also have Chuck, John Philbin, and the movie itself is really not that great outside of the, zombies feeling pain, but it is just such ooey gooey fun that you can't help but enjoy it. I know the story is basically 2 idiots release gas from a barrel that housed one corpse, and then that would revive everybody, including the corpse that would melt out and, come back to life, so to speak, and would be the brains, live brains. So, $4 million budget is basically 3 times that today. And they use a lot of that on the body horror. And I assume to pay some of the actors, the name actors, such as they were at the time. Even though some of the people in this could have qualified as being part of the living dead with how old they were. A $4.4 million opening. So that was pretty successful. And bear in mind, I think Day of the Dead happened in 86, if I recall correctly. Maybe it happened this year. I'm trying to remember, but I know Dawn of the Dead had happened in 78, and that was quite a bit of fun. I would argue the remake was just a tiny bit better, or at least a modest improvement on some aspects of it, and had a great, usage of Stupefy by Disturbed. In fact, I may retro-review Dawn of the Dead at some point. But the $4.4 million opening would be like $13.1 million in today's money. And the $14.2 million gross, meaning this was a success, would be $42.4 million in today's money. And you needed medical supplies. You need it. We got it. Okay, I can appreciate the stupidity of that advertising campaign, so they get points there. So there's skeletons being shipped from India, I guess, according to... I do want to say Frank, James Cameron does a good job as Frank, just kind of being this ooey gooey, zombie eventually, but also a bit of this whiner. I mean, he's actually more of the whiner, and Freddy becomes the zombie, and Frank just has a little bit of a dissolving of his sanity, even though you could argue he kind of is a little bitch with how he handles conflict, not very well. And 80s gangs, when one Cyndi Lauper reject clone had to be included, as per 80s law. I mean, hell, Cyndi Lauper is at WrestleMania just earlier in 85. And they kind of do meta-commentary stuff. Have you seen that movie, Night of the Living Dead, in 1969? A, hospital in Pittsburgh, a VA hospital, I believe, in Pittsburgh. Some toxin, trioxin, leaked into the, 245 leaked into the morgue and brought people back from the dead. Maybe, kinda, we'll see. But despite doing that, and despite doing they balance the meta-commentary with the zombie violence and the stupidity of the characters in this about as well as you can. It didn't overstay its welcome. It was about 90 minutes and even played a few clips over the end credits for whatever reason. I'm not going to say it's a perfect movie. It does have its issues. It does have characters making way too many stupid decisions, and not just because it's a horror movie, but I think because they were like, okay, we need to have Tina be a complete goddamn moron with her boyfriend, even though it's obvious that any sane person would say, yeah, this isn't going to go well. But after basically, freeing the gas from these, barrels that are totally sealed, 9 minutes in, we get the opening credits. So even back in the 80s, they were doing this shit. See, now they're doing it to where you go 20 minutes into a movie, or like Influencer, you go 30 minutes, or I think even that Hindu movie, Kill. No, maybe not Hindu. It was some Bollywood Tollywood thing where they went almost an hour into the movie before we got the opening credits. Or the title drop. So Frank and Freddy end up poisoned by the gas and gradually turning. And there's this guy, Colonel Crispin Glover, as I'm going to call him, that yells at his wife Ethel, who wanted to make him lamb chops, burning a puppet for some goddamn reason. I guess it's because she kept singing the song that doesn't end. And, of course, it reminds me of the thing between Bobby Heenan and Gene Okerlund. Gene Okerlund talking about how one wrestler moved like Carl Lewis. Heenan says, actually, he moved more like Sherry Lewis. And I'm referencing that in 85 because Bobby Heenan, me and Gene Okerlund, may they both rest in peace. They were staples of professional wrestling at that point, going back to the AWA days and stuff like that. Nevertheless, so we get the goofy people, including Suit-Eyed. I'm just trying to keep that. He was named after, or he had the same name as a video game character in the only TNA video game. I don't want to say it because I don't want to get flagged, but you know what I'm talking about. And we have a couple nerds like Chuck and one other girl that was wearing like a poodle skirt from the 50s for some reason. There's a character named Spider that I swore was the guy from Friday the 13th Part 8, but it wasn't him. There are some split dogs that were used for science class or whatever the fuck it was, but they're coming back to life. Frank stupidly tries to hammer it, and it doesn't look like he's hammering right there with how I'm describing it. And from there, we eventually get to where zombies come up. That's the thing, though. This movie takes a bit before the zombies really start going. You ever thought about, fantasized about dying? No. But Trash fantasized about being eaten by a bunch of old guys. She gets eaten by a bunch of old zombies a little bit later on. And Burt is the boss. I do have to say Clu Gulager does, pretty good job. Not really playing down to the material, because he did have bit parts and other stuff in television, but really gained a second lease on life by being in a bunch of bad horror movies, or a bunch of cheesy horror movies, because this is cheesy. It's not bad, it is cheesy, though. And the dead basically can feel pain. Now, that is a nice twist. It just gets thrown out the fucking window a little bit later on when they just went for more comedy and gore instead of actually going for some kind of balance. And you mean the movie lied? Because they tried to kill this guy that was trapped in this bag over there. And as you can hear, the fireworks are going to start going off because it is the 4th of July when I'm recording this. But they put this cut up body in the furnace. It burns, but then the ashes get into the sky, and then the rain comes down and revives the dead. Ernie basically is just like, sure, Burt, I'll do that. And he takes care of it. No rubber ducky fun in this. As hilarious as that would have been for Don Kalfa and Clu Gulager to be doing that, I don't really think that would have gone over well with test audiences. So I don't know who would have wanted to see that at that point. And after the dead are revived, Trash, after getting naked, again, I do have to say that was very nice. I knew a girl like that, actually, back at the movie theater that was actually a little more attractive than that. So, nevertheless, Trash gets eaten by old men. Other people get holed up in other places, such as, not near the warehouse, but in this place where Tina ends up stepping on this third step that was a little wonky, that was referred to earlier. She almost gets eaten by the goopy zombie. And then the leader of the group, Asai, basically is how I'm just going to say it. I have to say Asai, like acai moonsalt. So the zombie literally committed that, and then took out the Trash later. I had to say it. Actually, the Trash got taken out. Tina is so dumb, is what I noted. And as Frank and Freddy are starting to rot away gradually, and then very quickly, because this starts to take hold, paramedics show up. A couple paramedics end up getting eaten. Freddy ends up getting sulfuric acid thrown in his eyes at one point, but Tina then has to run away from him just before that, because he's like, the only thing that will take care of the pain is your brains. They also do capture this one woman, part of a woman, that had pinkish hair, that describes the only way to stop the pain is to eat brains. So that's actually kind of fucking haunting, to be perfectly honest. And then we have Chuck and the Poodle Skirt Girl, that whose name escaped me. None of these characters really matter. They're hanging out, and then more police arrive. They get killed actually by the zombies just bum rushing them, which is kind of hilarious. See, you can burn them, but you have to get like these flamethrowers and just literally burn them to a pile of smoldering ashes, and then hope it doesn't rain. So Burt and Spider go and get in the car, and then end up leaving Tina and Ernie, who has a broken foot, in the interim with all this action. Police end up showing up in like a cavalcade of cars, but then they end up getting bum rushed. And the last ditch effort of Ernie is to take Tina up into the attic where Freddy is trying to get at them. I don't know how the hell he would be able to get there and get up there unless he has springs in his legs or set up the ladder and understood that. But then again, you have the zombies calling for more reinforcements and using actual voices, so maybe they can do that. And then basically Burt ends up collecting the remaining survivors and goes to his phone and is trying to call the police at this blockade. This blockade, apparently, that is letting people through. The zombies somehow didn't find it till now. They bum rush, they kill, and they destroy. Well, Tina, even Trash, even zombie Trash still would. Why not? I mean, you only live once. And then Burt ends up calling the number on the barrel. General Crispin Glover gets contact. It's not Crispin Glover, as hilarious as that would be. Ethel, still dreaming about making better lamb chops so her husband will actually eat her cooking. But then again, at that age, you wouldn't want to eat anyone else's cooking. Never mind, I'm just going to move on from that. He makes a call, and the idea is there's this tank outside of Louisville or somewhere that's going to launch a nuke and destroys this area. And that's it. Everybody's destroyed in this block radius. And don't worry, the rain will take care of everything. The rain ends up reviving them, and then we get part 2. So there you go. That is the Return of the Living Dead. So, fun, yes. Silly, yes. Is it perfect? No. But it certainly has its charm. It's ooey gooey 80s charm. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky handles in the description. I'm John Ritland. Until we meet again, happy trails to you.